This is Channel 253.
Move to Tacoma! On this episode of Move to Tacoma.
I'm so mad that this is the kind of environment where we're thinking, oh, it's this thing that, oh, yes, we should, kind of remember, but not. Like, no. We are probably going to seeing mass deportations already. I just read a headline this morning about, immigrants being held in, a hotel in Panama, right, from a few different countries. It's happening now, and my community has sworn to make that not happen, that they would not let it happen again on our watch. And to have it happening again is just nightmarish and infuriating.
Channel 253 is member-supported. I'm producer Doug Mackey, and I hope you will show your support by going to channel253.com/membership and join. Thank you. We're back.
I'm Marguerite, and I want you to move to Tacoma.
Move to Tacoma, move to Tacoma, move to Tacoma.
You'll like it.
Move to Tacoma, move to Tacoma, move to Tacoma.com.
Hi, I'm Marguerite, and this is Move to Tacoma, and I'm here today with Tamiko Nimura, creative nonfiction writer and public historian.
You got it.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, before we get into everything, I'd love to know, when did you move to Tacoma and why?
I moved to Tacoma in 2004 for a job.
Oh, a classic reason?
A classic reason, yes. So been here now, like close, over 20 years, which is insane.
That's a long time.
Yeah, 20 years.
And what neighborhood do you live in now?
I live in what I like to call the south of the North End.
Oh, the south of the North End. And where would that be?
Yeah, so it's around a university that shall not be named. And it is, so like Proctor Union area.
Oh, okay. So you're not far from Doug, actually.
That's
just
right.
like kind of the north side of 6th Ave.
That's right.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. And what do you love about your neighborhood?
It's super cute. It's very walkable.
Yeah.
It's really fantastic to get to both 6th Avenue and to the Proctor neighborhood. And the Proctor neighborhood, though it's going through lots of changes, just has so much to offer, right?
Yeah.
There's just, there's a post office and supermarkets and cute little stores and cafes and the library and the post office. Like, it's just sort of what you can hope for in a walkable little neighborhood.
That's awesome. And I mean, just living where you're at, you're kind of in the middle of everything. Everything's pretty close to you.
Yeah, exactly. Close to parks for my kids to play in when they were little and my dog to run in now. All those things. Lots of greenery.
Do you have like a hot recommendation for people watching? Like, cool place to go, place to check out, like hot tip?
Ooh, okay. Let me think about this. I mean, in my neighborhood or?
Yeah.
Oh, in my neighborhood. Ooh, okay. I mean, Cactus has pretty solid Mexican food. And of course, the Metropolitan Market is kind of our second home. We just go there a lot.
It is the most cited reason that people want to live in the North End.
Well, it's funny. I moved from Seattle, right? And there was a Metropolitan Market up there that we used to go to. And when I came down here to look at jobs, I was driving around. I'm like, calling my husband. I'm like, guess what's here?
We're home.
We're home. Yes, exactly.
That's great. Well, the reason that I wanted to talk to you was because I think it's okay to say, like, you're writing a book. You're publishing a book.
I am publishing a book.
And what is your book called?
It's called A Place for What We Lose, A Daughter's Return to Tule Lake.
Yeah. And what is your book about?
Well, I'm still, my first podcast interview about the books. I'm still practicing the whole, elevator pitch thing. But it is, in a nutshell, how I was going through a very difficult time and decided to reread my dad's unpublished book about his time being incarcerated as a Japanese American during World War II. I decided to reread it, respond to it. I learned that I hadn't grieved him properly because he died when I was 10. And after that, I went on a community pilgrimage to the place where he was incarcerated with his family.
Wow. So there's a lot there.
So, light reading.
Yeah, just a page turner. Yeah. So your dad is from this area?
So he's actually from California.
Okay.
I grew up in California before I moved here. There are lots of us California expats up here.
Yeah, you're not alone.
And so I grew up in the Northern California area. I went to college in the Bay Area, came up here for grad school at UW Seattle, and then moved down to Tacoma after that for a job.
Awesome. So obviously Tacoma has a history we had a thriving Japanese community in Tacoma before World War II. And it was basically packed up and moved out during that time.
Right.
What, we've had Michael on the podcast before to talk about this a little bit, but if you were to give kind of like the explainer, the 30,000-foot explainer of what happened for people that might not know a lot about it.
Sure. So Japanese Americans came really as early as, the late part of the 19th century, mostly steamships, and ended up building a pretty thriving downtown community in the downtown core. So it was a good 12 blocks-ish or so downtown. And
there were open markets and all different kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah, there were photography studios, sweet shops, barber shops, import-export stores, restaurants, hotels, all operated by Japanese Americans. And then the farmers from Fife, Japanese American farmers, would come over, sell their produce here, ship things out. And because we had the port, there was a pretty direct steamship line from Japan to here. And when they got here, they saw our beautiful mountain and said, "Oh, it's just like our mountain back home, just like Mount Fuji."
Do we have any real what is the consensus on how many people we're talking about? How big was that community?
Yeah, so our records are a bit sketchy, but we believe that we're about 750-ish folks who basically got forcibly evicted from downtown Tacoma on May 17th and 18th, 1942. But, the city's Japanese population was also, kind of fluid in that there were folks coming in and out. There's the farmers, that were here from Fife. But we know that the number was about 700-something people. So when Executive Order 9066 was signed by President Roosevelt in 1941, 82 years ago today, that then authorized the military to create exclusion zones and round up and ship Japanese Americans on the West Coast to incarceration camps all over the place. The folks from Tacoma got sent from here on a train down to Pinedale, which is by Fresno, California. From there, they went to Tule Lake in Northern California, which is where my family was. So I like to think that they might have, brushed elbows or something in the mess halls or something like that. And then a lot of people from Tule Lake either stayed there or they went to Minidoka or Hart Mountain, so Wyoming or Idaho.
And I think it's, I hadn't really, I know I must have learned this much about it in high school, right?
Yeah, you're not alone.
It was a footnote, maybe in the 90s.
Yeah, we fought for a paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to discover, I think Eleanor Roosevelt was actually passing through Tacoma when this happened and made a call to her husband and was like, what the heck?
What's going on? Yeah.
How fast did this happen? How fast did they decide we're going to incarcerate all the Japanese Americans?
Yeah, it went relatively fast, right? So, Pearl Harbor's in December. Executive Orders 9066 is signed in mid-February. And I want to say that I believe in May or so are when folks in the area here started having to basically, report and register and go on the trains. So May 17th, 18th, after that, right? So just a matter of, a few quick months, really.
I think when I first heard this story, I had, my, very privileged lens, my patriotic, I'm sure that they just packed people up and it was no big deal and they came back and got all their stuff back and everything was fine. And clearly that is not what happened.
That is not what happened.
So what happened?
there, especially in our district and here in Tacoma, there was a very racist legislator named Albert P. Johnson, who Michael likes to talk about a lot, Michael Sullivan,
yes.
that is. And he really hated the Japanese, and he passed a lot of laws. And one of the laws that was in place at the time is that Japanese immigrants, so people like my grandparents, could not own land, right? Could not own businesses. And now in other parts of the country, and even in some places around here, the immigrants would then kind of buy things in their kids' names because the kids were born here and they had, birthright citizenship and, could own and operate property. But here they cannot own property even. And so once the folks who were here left, almost all of them lost what they had here.
Well, and it's not like they could bring even their possessions really with them,
No.
right? There was a very limited amount of stuff they were able to bring.
No, the line that we're told as descendants is all that they could carry. So there's this amazing picture of a little girl. She's like a toddler down at Union Station, right when they were leaving, and she has a little brown paper bag that she's carrying because they had to use whatever they could, right, in order to bring what they could. So they packed up, what they could carry, right, in suitcases, bags, whatever. And down at Union Station, there were military making sure, right, that they, could, quote, be helped on the train. And, the pictures from that time are very, like, people smiling and, even the armed guards are smiling and it's a happy time. But of course it wasn't, right?
No.
They were leaving their home and
Terrifying.
and right out, and after they left, right, downtown was dramatically changed.
So I'm sure you grew up with an awareness of this history.
Right.
You said your father passed when you were really young.
Right.
I don't think very many of us have like a full memoir from our fathers to revisit later. When you went back and read his story, what surprised you? Knowing the history, knowing like an intellectual understanding of the history, what did you learn?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So many things that you'll have to buy the book, honestly, to see.
Available soon.
But there are some things that really surprised me for sure, right? One of the most, we'll say, surprising and delightful things is that I learned I could actually talk to my dad again by rereading his book. He'd been gone, 30, 40 years by the time I started rereading it. And there were places where I was like, wait, how did you do this? Or what about this? There were questions that I found myself asking, right? And then there were things where I was like, wow, now that I have, studied this history, read about this history, known so much more about this history, there were even more questions that I wanted to ask him. There were beautiful things that the community did where he was incarcerated. So they had like a kite flying contest. Because when they got to camp, they had all these people to occupy, keep busy. And
what are they going to do all day?
What are they going to do all day? They hadn't built schools, theaters, churches, whatever yet, right? Those would come a little later. But when they got there, the immigrants, the Issei, decided we're going to have a kite flying contest. So they got newspapers and scrap paper, scrap wood from whatever they could, and built, and had a whole contest about who could build the best kite and fly it, and who could go the farthest. And I read about it in my dad's book, and I was like, are they the only ones who did this? Who else did this? And so I looked it up in Densho, which is our fantastic nonprofit in Seattle, devoted to this history. And there were in the newspapers was, a little article about a kite flying contest. And it was really beautiful, right, to see, but it was also so poignant, right? Because, these were people who, were building things to fly free, right? If they just cut the strings, right? The kites could fly and they could not, right? So it was a really painful and beautiful moment at the same time. There are other things that I learned that I really had to become the writer that the book was demanding, which is why it took me so long to write it. I started writing it back in 2010. This is how long it's taken to get this book into people's hands, and we hope to get it next year. But so many things that I think were really powerful and important for people to learn, particularly today.
So how long was your father there?
Yeah, so he was in 2 different camps. There was a, quote, temporary detention center. They called them assembly centers. That was in Marysville, California, Northern California, really rural. And from there, he got moved to Tule Lake in Northern California. And he spent another 3 years, about close to 3.5 years there. So he was incarcerated from the time that he was 10 to when he was 14.
That's incredible to imagine, like really growing up, having your most formative years in a prison.
There, yeah.
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 So what other surprising things did you discover about what day-to-day life was like for him at that age in that place?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I did read the book before he died, which is something that I should add, right?
As a little person.
Yeah, he gave it to me when I was maybe 8 or 9, right?
And you read it.
And I read it. I mean, I was a very precocious reader.
I was going to say, nerd.
Yeah.
Very nerdy reading.
Yes.
Good job.
Yes, been reading and I go way back. So I decided that I would, I read it, but, I was a kid, right?
Yeah.
I really didn't know much of what was going on. And, as the years have gone on, so much more has come to light about this history, right? People have, really since learned things about Japanese American resistance, right, to the incarceration. That's what the graphic novel that I co-wrote is about. But that is a relatively new story for a lot of people because the textbook version, right, is sort of like, they went, it wasn't a problem, it was peaceful, all of that. But inside the camps, in all these ways, there were all these forms of resistance.
And what is the name of the graphic novel that you just referenced?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's called We Hereby Refuse, Japanese American Resistance to Wartime Incarceration.
And what did that resistance look like?
All kinds of things. So there were the legal challenges, right, to all the way up to the Supreme Court. 4 cases made it to the Supreme Court. There were work stoppages. There were hunger strikes. There were resistance to the draft. There were mass protests, places where, the military was supposed to address everybody at a camp and nobody showed up. Lots and lots of different kinds of resistance, petitions to the president as well.
And what was the impact of that?
Well, it took them 4 years to close the camps, right?
Right.
So, different impacts. I mean, some of it were, some of the impact I would say is that, people took heart, right, and to cope in that resistance. And then some people were really unhappy with that kind of resistance because what happened for Japanese Americans during the war was that their loyalty was questioned, right? And so some folks thought that the very best way to show your loyalty was to go fight for the country that had imprisoned you. Others, like my uncle and my grandfather, knew the Constitution, knew things like free speech, and thought, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Right? We're going to not comply with these kinds of questions that you're asking us. They're catch-22 questions. So anyway, the 4 cases that made it to the Supreme Court, out of those, one was successful, that of Mitsuye Endo. She just got the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously. And she, in her case, was one that the Supreme Court had decided unanimously that, yes, the United States cannot detain admittedly loyal citizens like she was. She was born here, like my dad. So all that's, about 2/3 of the folks incarcerated were American citizens, right? So birthright citizenship and the Constitution should have meant that they should not have been incarcerated. Not that saying that my grandparents should have been incarcerated either. But yeah, if we're actually going by the letter of the Constitution, then yeah, they shouldn't have been.
It's hard not to think about the context of this moment and all of the executive orders we're seeing and all of the things that don't look particularly legal but still seem to be happening. It's not exactly inspiring to think, this thing happened, and then you go and you fight, which is maybe better for your mental health. Right. But in the end, they're going to end it when they decide to end it.
Right. Right.
Like, did I just take the total wrong lesson from your story?
No.
No. What is the, how do you contextualize that as you watch the news today?
The things today, I mean, on the one hand, right, is, it's our community nightmare, right? There are survivors who devoted so much of their lives to saying we are not going to let this happen again on our watch, right? And yet here we are,
right?
Right. And so I believe a lot of us descendants have taken up that mantle of keeping that history alive. There's still so many folks who know so little or nothing, right, about the camps that these were unconstitutional. And on the other hand, I also take a lot of heart and hope in the kinds of resistance that we're seeing from different communities. On Sunday, I'm going to be speaking at the Northwest Detention Center at a protest and rally sponsored by Tsuru for Solidarity, which is a Japanese-American direct action organization basically intended to be an abolitionist one, to close down these kinds of private prisons, right? Really to, abolish prisons, but to really, target these particular kinds of sites.
And for people who don't know, there's a for-profit detention center here in the Tide Flats of Tacoma, owned by Geo Group, Northwest Detention Center.
That's right.
You can Google it. We'll put information for all this in the
Thank
show
you
notes as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's actually now, they keep shifting the name, I think, because
Is it called something new?
Now it's called the Northwest Ice Processing Center. Well, this is probably what I'm going to talk about on Sunday, though, right? I don't know if people know this, but that exact address, that exact site was a meatpacking center.
Before it was a prison. All right. Well, let's take a break. I want to come back to this, and I want to dig in more to, how much we don't know about our own history.
Great.
What we don't know, and what lessons we can take from that as we go forward.
That sounds great. Thanks.
This is Citizen Tacoma host Eric Hanberg and Channel 253 co-founder. With me is sound producer Doug, here to ask you to support Channel 253 in this new year. We are independent media. 2025 is going to be a hard year in a variety of ways, but we can keep Tacoma strong by covering the things that you care about.
That's right. Even though nationally things may be difficult, you can have a tangible effect and input on things happening locally, and we'll try to inform you and aid you in that quest.
We want to be responsive to the listeners because we are listener-funded. If you like the things that we talk about, Citizen Tacoma is going to be all in on the mayoral race and all of the other things happening in our city. We have the international angle from Nate and Hope. Please consider giving us your support at channel253.com/membership. $4 a month, $40 a year. Your support makes a real difference.
And those of you who are members already, and that's a number of you, we thank you for your continued support.
Thank you, and we hope to see you on the Slack forums, a special member benefit. Again, channel253.com/membership.
Move to Tacoma!
And we're back with Tamiko Nimura. Welcome back.
Hi.
So we were just talking about the history of Japanese incarceration in the U.S. and in Tacoma in particular. And I think I was saying, I just have such a cursory knowledge of this history. And even though we have so many organizations that are dedicated to education and certainly following you on different platforms online, I've learned a lot over the years. Like you say, having Michael Sullivan on the podcast in the past, he has spoken about it. But what do you think people don't really know? What do you most often see that people just don't seem to understand about America's history and Tacoma's history with Japanese incarceration?
Yeah, I think people tend to think about Japanese American incarceration as a sort of flash in the pan, right?
Yeah.
Or a one-time kind of thing, and that it's not a continuum of racist history in the United States, quite honestly.
Okay.
Right? So a lot of people tend to start this history of incarceration with the attack on Pearl Harbor, right? With Japan's attack. But in reality, the United States government was following Japanese immigrants, right? Surveilling them pretty much from day one, right? And then passed all these laws and policies, right, against Japanese, specifically against Asians, that there's a longer history of anti-Asian racism, right, that we don't necessarily get once we start talking about Pearl Harbor first.
And that created the conditions. So when Pearl Harbor happened, they just...
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It was more of the match, right, than, the actual building of the... But, the fuel was already there, right? And you could see it very clearly. And, the Japanese propaganda the anti-Japanese propaganda, right? In the newspapers of the time, you can see people equating with the same word, the word Jap, right, which is a slur. They would say, Jap's about to leave for, for greener pastures, they were about to leave for, parts unknown. And then right next to it, you would see like headlines about the Japanese army in the Pacific, right? So there was, a really direct conflation there, right? And there were all these political cartoons. There's a, very famous Dr. Seuss cartoon, right, about, anti-Chinese folks, and lots of anti-Japanese stuff as well. If we think about it, a little further, right, there's a history that this country has, right, of, trying to isolate, groups, not far from here. We could think about the Cushman boarding school, right, and Native folks. Mm-hmm. There's a long history of this country rounding people up, particularly people of color, right, and, trying to say that they are dangerous, other, less than human.
Yes. And, I'm in my mid-40s. I went to elementary school in the 80s.
Yeah.
I graduated in the 90s. And I think, I came up in this period of, the arc of history is bending towards justice. This happened. And, of course, to a degree, it's still happening. But we're cleaning it up. It's getting better. And I don't think I have believed that for a while. And I don't think anybody paying attention to what's happening can believe that our past is not directly informing the decisions that we're collectively making now.
Absolutely.
As other people, what you're describing when you talk about headlines next to each other, policy headlines next to racist headlines, that's happening now. That's happening every day today.
Yep.
And so when you look at what's happening, what are the lessons that you would like to see? I don't know. I'm imagining people watching just going that get it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do we learn from the past? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is who we are, first of all. That's the first lesson I'm thinking of. Yeah. This isn't coming out of nowhere, these decisions that we're making. Yeah. This is who we are.
Yeah.
So what do we do?
Well, I like to think that that resistance and solidarity are where we place our hopes, and collective resistance and solidarity are where we place our hopes. Right, that the organization that I'm speaking for or with on Sunday at the Northwest Detention Center, Tsuru for Solidarity, has been partnering with La Resistencia, right, which has been a force in the community trying to help those detained in the detention center now, and really out there, as an encampment, right, protesting and trying to make sure that the prisoners inside are being heard. Mm-hmm. That when they go on hunger strike, that La Resistencia is one of the first people that they, organizations that they contact. And so I think, we need to think about solidarity. We need to think that we're not powerless, but when we can, and so much of this is meant to make us feel powerless, because it's meant to make us feel alone and isolated. But the only way we're going to get through all of this is together.
Well, and it does seem like increasingly over the years, everybody is more consumed by design, by the system. We are working, we're surviving. Mm-hmm. And not on top of that, we all seem to have lost our social skills, our communitying skills a little bit in the pandemic. Yeah. And this idea of, find solidarity, find collective. Mm-hmm. It's like everybody's trying to figure out how that works. Yeah. And is it as simple as, maybe start following La Resistencia, start following some of these organizations. Mm-hmm. Or is there more to it? Is there some sort of internal shift that has to happen before you can really be collective when you've been an individualist your whole life? Most of us are really socialized.
Oh, sure.
To be...
that's capitalism, right?
Right. Yeah. It is.
Right. Yeah.
If you were wondering.
Right. I know we're meant to feel alone, but we are by design, I think, really meant to be together. Right. We are, there are so many organizations, there's so many folks doing such good work. I guess I also want people to know that, they don't have to start alone either, right?
Yeah.
That there's certainly, 350 Tacoma, Indivisible Tacoma, there's La Resistencia, there's Tsuru for Solidarity. And, there's also things like, let's make sure that we know this history. Let's make sure our kids know this history. Let's educate our kids. Let's take them downtown, right, to Tacoma. There's a free walking tour that my husband and Michael Sullivan and I created where you can see these sites, right, where Tacoma Japanese Americans lived in the past, and some photos from when they were actually evicted at Union Station. Every May, I work with the Washington State History Museum and hold a day of remembrance for specifically Tacoma Japanese Americans and the days that they were forced to leave the city. So that's one other small thing that they can do. But you can start small, right? It's really those larger things, right? Those larger actions that can make a difference.
And when you think about like what people can contribute, I think that there's this confusion right now of like, well, I don't even know what I need to do.
Sure.
And I know this sounds like a really simple question, but like in order to have the kind of communities that are connected that can resist oppression, I mean, like, is there room for people that bake? Is there room for people that babysit? Yeah. Like, how does this all work?
The revolution will always have better snacks. Thank you very much.
One would hope.
Yes.
But I mean, I'm trying to ask a serious question that's also like accessible to regular people. Like does it look like sign waving? Does it look like protesting? Or are there other ways to plug in and be supportive of communities that are really going through it right now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are ways that you can, I know that we think that protesting and sign waving and marching are sort of the things for resistance, right? But there are also super meaningful ways that just get a lot less press.
Yes,
yeah?
That's what I'm looking for.
So another group that I'm thinking about is the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project.
Yes.
Which does really great work.
Yes.
Even if you're not into necessarily, for whatever capacity, you're not up for like being outside the detention center, making signs, whatever. You can make a monthly donation, right, to the NWIRP. You can make a monthly donation to Tsuru for Solidarity or La Resistencia. You can make sure that your kids, right, are reading, the kinds of histories that you want them to read, which are more complete, more accurate histories of our country and our city and our state and our region. You can make sure that Black history doesn't go away, that AAPI history doesn't go away, that you're still celebrating them. I'm going to.
Right.
Right. If, someone on your school board, right, is making noises, right, about the kinds of books, right, that, your kids can or can't be reading, you can look at, book bans. There's a whole great organization called Authors Against Book Bans that has just started up. I think really if you just start looking at, some of the best places for people to follow, I like to follow the work of, I think it's Kelly Hayes and Mariam Kaba on Blue Sky, who wrote this fantastic book called Let This Radicalize You, and which sounds maybe for folks that, I don't know, radical.
I think we're all there.
I don't know.
I think we're ready.
They wrote this before the election, published it before the election, right? And you read it and you're like, okay, this is what I need to do now. They wrote it for young people, right, to be organizing. If you can't feel like you can go out and support, things yourself, you can certainly find an organization to support. I try to do my little resist calls or my resist texts, every day. There's ResistBot, which is super easy. There's 5calls.org. Yeah. But really making noise with our Congress, their power is being taken away too. So we really all need to be, if they're, working in ways that align with our values, we need to support them. They need numbers that say, I have this many constituents, right, supporting me. If they're not aligning with our values, then we need to tell them so.
Yeah. Oh, that was good. I didn't tell you to have a whole speech prepared on how to resist oppression from the largest empire in the world. But that was really useful.
Well, good. Empires also fall.
Yeah. I mean, the astrology is clear.
It is actually. From what I've heard.
It's clear.
I've been following this too. We're this new age of Aquarius. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you read the stuff from the 70s, right? Folks from some of the really great writers like Tony Kidd Bambara and Toni Morrison, Audre Lorde, people who are writing around this time. You're like, are you sure you're not writing about this right now?
Right.
Actually, the other thing that I guess gives me a little bit of comfort is that we've been here before. Not all of us survived, but a lot of us have been here before, as a country, as movements, as organizations, and we have numbers on our side too.
There's that expression about history not repeating, but
rhyming.
Rhyming.
Yes.
So in that, ooh, sorry, Doug, about the mic. About that, your book is coming out in the coming year.
2026.
What does it mean to be publishing a book like this right now?
I really had a hard time figuring out how to announce it, even because I've been working on it for so long, right? I mean, I wanted to bring my dad's story, along with my story to, a larger public. This is over a decade and a half, right, of working on it. So on the one hand, I'm just overjoyed. I'm so happy that it'll actually, come to light, that my dad's words will finally get published even. And it's with the University of Washington Press, which is a really dream press for people publishing about Japanese American incarceration. They've done fantastic titles about this topic, and I think they will know what to do with the book. I'm also extremely furious that it's so terribly relevant right now. Right. I'm so mad that this is the kind of environment where we're thinking, oh, it's this thing that, oh, yes, we should, kind of remember, but not. Like, no. We are probably going to are seeing mass deportations already. I just read a headline this morning about, immigrants being held in, a hotel in Panama, right, from a few different countries. It's happening now, and my community has sworn to make that not happen, that they would not let it happen again on our watch. And to have it happening again is just nightmarish and infuriating.
Thank you for doing what you're doing, sharing all of the work of the last decade to help people that don't already understand, who probably should understand better. Because I mean, it's not just one community. I mean, this is what you learn, right? It starts here, and then no one is going to come out of this unscathed.
Yeah. No one's going to be exempt from all of this horror show.
I feel like I'm supposed to do a little. You can find Tamiko's book. But what I really want to ask is there anything I haven't asked you about, that you want to make sure comes across for folks? Like, this is something that is a historic. It's something that happened that is happening.
Yeah. There's a journalist that I follow. His name's Ed Young. He used to write for The Atlantic, and then he left The Atlantic. He was covering COVID particularly. And I watched this fantastic talk about that he gave at a journalism conference. And one of the things that he said that stuck with me is that one of the most important things we can do as humans is to bear witness to suffering. So I hope that all of us can, and it's not going to, you can't do that alone, right? It's a lot harder to do it alone. So I think all of us are going to need to figure out ways that we can bear witness to suffering and to try to alleviate it wherever we can, however we can, in the smallest ways we can, even. It all adds up. It all counts.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you for coming on and talking about this. Thanks for writing the book.
Thanks for having me.
And we're going to drop links to as many of the things you mentioned here into the notes so people can follow up, educate, plug in, and find solidarity, like you said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you like this podcast, check out movetotacoma.com. MoveToTacoma.com is a neighborhood guide, blog, and podcast to help people in Tacoma, Pierce County, and beyond find their place in the city of destiny. More information at MoveToTacoma.com. Move to Tacoma is part of the Channel 253 podcast network. Check out these other shows: Grit and Grain, Nerd Farmer, Interchangeable White Ladies, What Say You, Citizen Tacoma, and Kitchen 253.
This is Channel 253.